If movies are your thing, you're here in the right place, and that place is the Chronicle, the official film podcast of the People's Movies. Welcome back. Yesterday we reviewed the best films. Today it's going to be the worst films of 2024. As ever, I am your host, I'm Paul. I'm the editor of the People's Movies, and as ever, Clotilde is my co-host. How are you, Clotilde, today?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Hopefully we won't have any problems that we had yesterday, folks. We had to stop starting with the internet, so hopefully today we can get through it and then we'll get it online. So, as I said, this is the worst films. Thank you very much for everyone who has listened to the best films. Please do share it and comment on it as well. Share even your own list through the comments. So today, shall I start, Clotilde?
Please.
Right, so the first film is a film, let's just say, I think we might have added the first part on last year's list, which you can find at the website, Rebel Moon Part 2, Scargiver. Let's just say myself and Clotilde have reviewed this, and Clotilde, yourself, you actually did the main review for the website, and as you know, Zack Snyder's absolute disaster zone here. You know, it's his Star Wars wannabe, and obviously Sophia Patella once again is Cora, and so obviously she's wanting to save a bunch of farmers who, when you see them on the screen, well, hopefully you don't, they look like they're ever been the Lord of the Rings. So this film is a very uninvolving, dull film, and when it comes to sort of stories in the film, the norm, Clotilde, in films, it's the norm to sort of build a rapport or a relationship with those characters, regardless what side of the fence are, be it the good guys or the bad guys. Either side, there's nothing you can actually say positive about them, and there's nothing in these characters in this film you would want to actually share their journey or their path, because you don't care about them, you get no sympathy about them, you get no empathy, and it basically makes the purpose of this film devoid. And over the years, there's been films which the original release version isn't always the version that the filmmaker is wanted to release, and maybe months later, years later, they get to release that version, and sometimes it has worked. It was worked for Zack Snyder, not necessarily a major way, but a minor way, when he released the Snyder version of the Justice League. Still a bad movie, but when they re-released Part 1 and Part 2 again recently, it just made you hate these two movies more. But now it's 3 to 3.5 hours long. They're terrible, aren't they, Clotilde?
I hated this film. I don't like. It's one of those films where it feels like there's nothing positive to say, and it's so sad. I think with the first Part 1, I was sort of willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, and I know they were setting up a lot of things, and I don't think any of it worked, but at least I thought if they're done with sort of like the setup and the world building, which for a sci-fi I do understand that's quite extensive and big, then maybe Part 2 can actually be interesting. But it just felt like a sort of remake of Part 1. Like the story beats were the exact same. And I felt like there was no growth in the characters at all. I couldn't even tell you the plot of Part 2 because nothing is happening. Like people just keep talking, and it's like a lot of tell rather than show. You don't really see much. There's like one or two extra moments, but that's it. And it barely even moves the plot forward. I remember the scene where they're basically sitting around, like on a table, and they go around and tell each other their backstories. But the problem is that we know them already, and so it's like this big, I don't know, this big moment where you're like, I know all of this, and I'm not even like seeing their backstories. It's basically just like all telling each other this is what happened, and like a mini flash. It doesn't work from a storytelling point of view. It's just really bland. It's very sad because like this is meant to be, I think, an epic sci-fi, and it has nothing of epic. Very boring, I think. But
Yeah, I totally agree. It is. It's very boring, very sloppy, very derivative mess, and it sort of gives unoriginal a new name. Don't get me wrong, Zack Snyder has made a few decent films during his time. I mean, the Dawn of the Dead remake, man, he made the zombies run rather than drag like the original did, and that was a good move. That's what made that version of the film real interesting. And controversially, his Superman, Henry Cavill, is one of the best since Christopher Reeves. And Man of Steel, it isn't a perfect film, but it is a decent film. As I say, controversially, David Corensey, he swept. He's going to be the new version, and I understand James Gunn wants to introduce a younger audience, younger cast, new audience. So, and take DC in a new direction. But that Superman looks like a young man who just gets Superman pajamas for his Christmas here, you know. But this film always says George Lucas or Disney have got nothing to fear about Rebel Moon, because whoever rejected Zack Snyder's idea of Star Wars to make the next Star Wars should be given a pay rise, should be given a Medal of Honor in defence of film.
Sure. 100%.
Give him everything, and Snyder should be jailed for crimes against cinema. And if Netflix, they're no saints either. They have released some absolute trash over the years as well, and there's quite a few this year. But if they've given the green light to the third film, if they're not bankrupt already, they will be after this film. It's an absolutely terrible film. So that is Rebel Moon Part 2. Clotilda, what is your first film on your list?
Mine has to be Megalopolis because it was really bad.
Yeah.
It's just, I watched it in a public screening, so there had been talks about it already. So it feels like I did go in with like at least a tiny bit of expectation of how bad it was going to be, as in nobody actually liked it that I know. And yet I was disappointed. There were people in my cinema that were just laughing at it. It wasn't just, they weren't even laughing at the funny things. They were just laughing because it was a mess. And I couldn't even do that because I was just bored. It's, again, I think it's a very empty film. To his credit, I think at least Francis Ford Coppola had a very promising idea. The sort of like, I don't know, the sort of like premise and basis of it, I think could have gone like a lot better. And I don't know what happened, because what it is, it's not good. It's just a mess. Like plot wise, there's some plot elements that are brought in, and then there's also like they never continue. There's nothing to them. They're not even relevant to the main plot, and you're like, why am I watching this? And I think that's why it feels like such a long film. It's already quite long, but it feels longer. It feels so long. The film was never ending. And I kept hoping it would as well. It was, yeah, I didn't have a good time with it. I don't know what exactly the issue is, but it's just I kept feeling like there was nothing interesting. The characters didn't interest me, and the stakes weren't very good. It all felt very flat, and I think there were a lot of good performers. Like I think Adam Driver is a good actor, Giancarlo Esposito is a good actor, Aubrey Plaza, she's good, but none of them really stood out to me. I think, what could they do with such a script is also a question, but it just felt like there was nothing to it. Even when it comes to like what meant to be the more dramatic moments, I just kept thinking, I don't care. There's nothing that makes me care about these characters, and I think it's a very much again like a storytelling and plot issue, or just writing issue. But it's also paced really badly. I think it was so boring. It was so long.
I totally agree on. It was such a. I'll give, as I said, give him kudos, Coppola, for trying to do something ambitious and different. Something that I think he was trying to do something that was more like a Roman tragedy, that type of story. I mean, you can see the way the dialogue, the acting, especially that part where they're all up at the beginning, we're all trying to decide what creation they should go for. Should they go for Adam Driver's creation or their idea? But my God, that was just an awful, awful film. How the mighty have fallen. How can the guy who's made one of the greatest trilogies in cinematic history can come out with this? And the sad thing is, it's going to probably be his last film.
Yeah.
If it wasn't going to be his last film, that film's probably killed his chance of actually making a last film, because it's just awful. I mean, Shia LaBeouf, my God, what was he on in that film? He was on something. He was on something really bad. But it was, the actors, as you mentioned several yourself there was a great acting fraternity there, but it looks like they're all being trained to be actors from William Shatner. They all look like they wanted to do a scene at an old Star Trek episode, It was just absolutely deplorable. It was just, I watched a press screening, and there was maybe about 6 or 7 people in this. It was southwest side of Glasgow. There's Silverburn Shopping Mall. It has Glasgow's main IMAX screen in there. My God, it just looked awful, even for that. And everyone was laughing. And I won't name the newspapers or who the writers were, but there was a couple of journalists there for some of the main newspapers, and I'm not talking like Scottish newspaper, but one was but the Scottish editions of British newspapers, were here, and they were all laughing here. And some of the writers, obviously after COVID, still wear the masks. Several years after after the pandemic, this guy who writes for the Majors, he could not stop laughing. He was laughing that much, he had to take his mask off and actually walk out the screen. You can actually still hear him laughing in the bathroom, That's how much he was laughing. Now again, we were all laughing as well. All of us, what it did do was it got us talking, and that's what I think films should be doing. Although unfortunately for this film, it was a negative impact rather than a positive impact. Shall we go on to the next film?
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
can.
My next film is Argyle. I was sort of wondering, is Matthew Vaughn any better than Zack Snyder? And I'll probably say yeah, he's marginally better, because he did give us some decent films like Kick-Ass, Kingsman, only the first film, X-Men First Class, Stardust, and even Layer Cake. The last two had their moments, but what went wrong with Argyle, I really, really don't know. And it stars Bryce Dallas Howard, and she's like a reclusive author of espionage novels, and they're all centered around the agent Argyle. And look who's just cropped up again, Henry Cavill. And things do start to get out of control when her books start to mirror sort of real life and spy life. Every night she used to like to sit in front of a laptop with her cat Alfie, create new stories, but that became a thing in the past when. So obviously there was a real spy came into this. It was Aidan, who's played by Sam Rockwell, to come to her rescue. The crazy thing is, Sam Rockwell's character is allergic to cats, but he still saves the day. This film, when I was thinking, should I pick it or not pick it? First of all, it was a film that I think split critics and audience. It divided them. A lot did like it, a lot didn't like it. But I found it too predictable. As for a comedy, I don't mind satire and really silly things and making fun of like institutions, like when I mean institutions, I don't mean churches and that, political institutions, or like spy institutions, that type of thing. But I think its major problem was it was too repetitive. It was the same scene over and over again. Hence it became too predictable. It's very undecisive, and it really doesn't know what it wants to be sometimes. And I actually felt like it felt like a rejected Kingsman story, and the character development in it was very waver thin, and it left you expecting you to expect certain things for each character. Clotilde, have you actually seen this film?
I have. I do
What did-
agree that it's quite predictable, but I don't usually mind like predictable films. I think for me it was just like it's not obviously the greatest film. It's not, to me it's not that bad because a lot of forced films, which is very
Yeah,
sad.
yeah.
Also there's a cat, and that alone made me very happy. And then the rest of the movies on my list are not.
That cat definitely went through some things,
I
including
love that cat.
was it thrown off a building when they were trying to escape
Yes,
London?
yes it was.
Don't worry, folks, it's not a real cat, it's a CGI cat. That's why Aidan, Sam Rockwell's character, is still here with us. I mean, I just found it a very tedious and incoherent film. And for myself, it was borderline, should I make it a worse film or just a disappointing film? It was very dull, it was bloated at times. However, I can see why some people were enjoying it. If you just enjoy that dumb scene over and over again, you probably find some solace in it. So, Clotilda, what is your next movie on your list?
Right, there's a Netflix film. Yeah, I think it's quite appropriately called Uglies because it's an ugly film.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
I don't know why I watched that film, to be honest, because I didn't think it was gonna be great, but I thought, maybe it's gonna be fun. Um, so when I started it, I felt like I was sort of traveling back in time, like 2012, because I think that film would have done quite well back then. It's like, when like Hunger Games and Divergent and The Maze Runner and all that was coming out and it was super popular. It feels like a sort of B version of Hunger Games, at least, because I think that's a good film. Honestly, it feels very wrong to watch it now because you're like, this feels like it has been made in 2012 and somehow it didn't come out for like 12 years. Even like I think even the CGI and the technology feels very 2012, which makes it even funnier. I don't know if they did that on purpose. If they did, that's not clever. I don't think so. Um, the whole premise is basically these people are like in a dystopic society and they're all ugly. right? Until you turn like it's either 16 or 18, I don't remember. And on your birthday, you can basically like become a new person through plastic surgery. So you spend your whole like life creating this version of yourself that you want. Like you can change your hair and whatever. They actually have like a sort of CGI looking thing that looks like them, and they can sort of, I want this hair, whatever. So on their birthday they change. That's the whole thing, and they become beautiful like everyone else. And the whole premise is that when they become beautiful, there's like nothing wrong in the world. Like that's how they solve everything. That's how they achieve world peace, by making people beautiful. Um, yeah. So I think the premise could have been interesting if they did some sort of like commentary on, I don't know, plastic surgery or whatever, which they try and do, but they don't really. It's just people running around. Yeah, it's a bit crazy in the sense that it shouldn't work and it doesn't, because I feel there's absolutely nothing to it except like these people running around. It's also quite funny, I think, because obviously like these are actors and they play the ugly version. That's meant to be the ugly version of this teenager, and you're like, obviously there's nothing ugly about them. Like these are really not really famous, but like relatively famous actors, Hollywood actors. Obviously they're not ugly. And the whole premise is that you're meant to look at them and be like, oh, they're so ugly. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend. But hey, if you do want to watch it, it's on Netflix.
Guess what? It's on my list as well.
Yeah, actually.
Yes, yes. I think what happened, I must have seen your tweet on
Hmm.
X or somewhere on social media. I was making my dinner at the time and I thought, you know what, I have something in the background. And
I love that.
I watched the first 5 minutes and I thought, and I tweeted, I says, I think this is a comedy of the year, even though it's not a comedy. It's so
Hmm.
bad. It rips
Yeah,
off, as you said, everything the Divergent and the Hunger Games and Maze Runner. It is scraping the barrel, the bottom of the barrel, not just for the story, but the actors as well. Their performances
yeah.
are wooden. The dialogue's absolutely poor. And the pace
Oh, the
goes that,
dialogue is horrible.
yeah, the pace goes that fast. It goes faster than a Japanese bullet train. And also it looks cheap and nasty, you know.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, it's adapted from a Scott Westerfield novel from
Okay.
2005. So when I was just doing a little bit of research on the film, it was even back then it was criticised for being a bit dated. It's an absolutely
Hmm.
hideous film. It's an MCG film. MCG, he did the Charlie's Angels reboot movies, Terminator Salvation,
Yes,
The Babysitter,
that's
Netflix. And I will say the one thing that they do get right is all about the plastic surgery, especially among
hmm.
young people and girls especially. My friend who he's similar age to me, late 40s, and his daughter is probably similar age or early 20s, and all they talk about is, oh, get their cheeks up, get their lips bigger, and their breasts even bigger, and half of them are not even 25 yet. That is something, and I don't want to be disrespectful to women my age. That's the sort of things if women in my age are feeling a bit not, how would I say it? They don't feel confident enough. A lot of things like that help them to go out, into society. But not a 25-year-old or under, or even up to into the 30s, none of them should be thinking about that. It's absolutely horrible why these people are actually thinking about that. And the CGI, you know what they remind me of? Remember, if you, I shamefully admit, I've seen the Twilight movies, and that was a long time ago. And,
Yeah. No,
and
I know what you mean though.
yeah, when Kirsten Stewart becomes a vampire and she shakes her hair like the way Glinda does does in Wicked, and she suddenly becomes a vampire with the eyes and and she's a completely different. It was like that when they changed, and it
Yeah,
it just felt so.
that's so true actually.
It's so bad, So I think we've said enough about Ugly. You're right, it's an ugly
Mhm.
film. Let's have a look at my next film, Borderlands.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
And make it and leave it at it like that because this is awful.
Oh no.
Yeah, the writing was on the wall for this one, I think, right away because it's a video game adaptation. and oh boy, it fell quicker than the walls of Jericho or even the House of Cards. And the thing is, it's got a big, well-known cast, and the shot one for me was Kate Blanchett. And to me, Kate Blanchett, she does these more intellectual dramas or TV series, something a wee bit arty. Lord of the Rings, where she made her name in. So she plays Lilith, who's an infamous bounty hunter, and she's sent on a mission to find the daughter of Atlas. He's like one of these big, really, he's a crime lord, who's played by Edgar Ramirez. There's one snag. She has to head back to her home planet, Pandora, but she reluctantly does head back. But she ends up teaming up with a bunch of misfits. You've got Roland, it's Kevin Hart. You've got Patricia Tanis, which is Jamie Lee Curtis. Claptrap is a robot, voiced by Jack Platt. Ariana Greenblatt, she plays Tiny Tina, and Florian Montagu, who plays Craig. And together, obviously, they unearth a secret, and that secret has them with the universe in their hands. So, this is a film. Gamers have been waiting a long time for a film that delivers on their favourite games. Don't get me wrong, there's a few getting very close. Majority are just money grabbing. Schemes like this one, because this is no plot. And it feels like Eli Roth is nicked to Guardians of the Galaxy. And this infamous barrel, which I've mentioned before in the era, once he's coming into practice, is coming into this one again. I think he's scraped the bottom of the Guardians of the Galaxy barrel, trying to scrape to see if there's any substance. The special effects in it don't feel finished either. The dialogue feels as if it was written by a 12-year-old. And what this film will do, it'll test your mettle, it'll test your patience. And then patience does hit you very, very quickly in this. And it's bad when any gamers that are movie fans, film fans, hate it. What hope is a non-gaming film fan got? And it makes me wonder, why did Lionsgate choose Eli Roth to actually make this? As in, not necessarily his acting. He's appeared in The Glorious Bastards. He was the Jew with the baseball bat. He, until now, that's probably his biggest film, because a lot of his films are horrors. Though he did do one a few years ago with Kate Blanchett and Jack Black, something to do with clocks. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but it's very forgettable. And I tell you one thing, Kate Blanchett must have been bored or desperate, because she's a big miscast in this. This is a truly awful film. And what I'll say is, I'm going back to Star Wars again. Jar Jar Binks, all is forgiven. This was probably one of the few films that I gave it 0 stars. Absolutely terrible film. And Clotilde, please do not watch this. Unless you're absolutely bored and it's on Netflix or a streaming service that you may have. It's up to you if you want to watch it. So, Clotilde, what's your next film?
My next one is Chronicle by Paolo Sorrentino. I hated it. To be honest, I didn't expect to like it. I don't particularly like his films. I didn't like his previous one, The Hand of God, very much.
Oh,
But
I like that.
I thought I'd give it a go. And even like knowing, how Paolo Sorrentino makes his movies and like the problems that I sometimes have with them, it was even bad like for that. Even as a Paolo Sorrentino film, I thought it was bad. So yeah, I don't know. It just felt like basically a sort of remake of The Hand of God, but without the sort of autobiographical elements, which I think are what makes The Hand of God a bit more interesting. And also, like, Parthenope is meant to be about Naples, obviously. I think it has, like, even the director said it in interviews, it's like meant to be sort of like about the city, as in she's in a way the personification of the city and about the beauty of the city and all of that. I think that The Hand of God does that better than Parthenope does in many ways. I kept thinking, I'm not seeing anything of Naples. I mean, you see a little bit, you see some shots, but for a film that claims to be about like the beauty of the city, then I don't think you see any of that. I think you see a lot more of the actual city in The Hand of God.
Yeah, you do.
Obviously, it takes place in Naples as well. It was very, I think it was a very confused film. I don't think Paolo Sorrentino really thought it through. Plot-wise, I don't think it makes any sense. And I watched it with some people, like my friends and my mom. So after I walked out and I was like, did you guys get any of that? Is it me? And nobody got it. Like it's not just me. I don't know, it starts and like I don't remember the exact year, but it tells you like, this is the year, this is the time, and then you follow the life of this woman called Parthenope, who is somehow meant to be like the city, but she's also not really. She's also like just a beautiful woman. It's very confusing. But there are moments that you're watching it and you're like, clearly it's not set during that time. Like, why are you telling me the specific time when this is set? When then I'm watching it, I'm like, this is clearly not that though. Like, visually, there's something wrong. It's just insane to me. There's a scene. It's actually quite beautiful. Some of the scenes are really beautiful, but I just kept thinking, what is it telling me? Like, there's a scene of her basically sitting down. I don't think it's a spoiler. Like, she's just sitting down outside the university, and there's people like storming in. It's a really beautiful scene. In my head, I was like, what is this meant to be? Like, it has nothing to do with the plot. Like, it doesn't come back after. It's just this random scene in the middle of the movie, and it doesn't speak to like anything of the time period because you're like, oh, is this like a time when I don't know there were insurrections in the city? No, none of that. It's not like 1968 or whatever. Nothing of the sort. And it's just there are so many beautiful scenes that are just like they're for nothing. They don't serve anything. Like not the plot, not the characters. It's that drove me crazy. I was very close to working out. That's one of those films when you keep thinking, oh, this has got to be the last scene. It's not. And I kept thinking that for a very long time. And my friend said it best. She said she felt like she watched like a 2 hour long perfume ad or like an ad for like Dolce and Gabbana. And I think that's so true. That is exactly what it feels like. When like perfume ads specifically don't have a plot, that's exactly what Perfume feels like.
Yeah.
It's just very, very confused, very confusing. There's nothing really about it, except that some of the shots are actually really good, but they don't seem to serve any purpose at all. And I also think it's quite dated. Like the only thing you ever know about this woman is that she's beautiful because every single character keeps telling her. And from a script point of view, that is horrible because we just learn things about her that she's beautiful through people telling us. Like, why are you telling me? Like, I should know things because I see them. It's a film. But also, like, there's nothing else to her personality. And I think it just gets really boring because I think, I mean, ever, and like, not just in 2024, but especially in 2024, I think we're a bit past having female characters like that. Not very dated and it's not interesting. And I think even Paulo Sorrentino should do better than that. Yeah, I will say though, there is one character I really like. I don't remember the name of the character, but he's played by Silvio Orlandi, I think, and he's so good. He's so funny. Unfortunately, he's not in many scenes, but the scenes that he's in are so funny. I think he improvised the whole thing so good. The only time where I was like, this is actually quite fun. But that's it. I also think the rest of the cast, I mean, they didn't have much to do, but in terms of like, they couldn't do that much. But it felt really flat for me and very bland. There was like nothing that I was like, oh, this is at least a good performance. It just all of it was very flat.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. I have seen The Hand of God. I
Yeah,
actually enjoyed it. Maybe it's a bit of nostalgia for me because I used to live and work Sorrento, which is just the other side of
yeah,
the Bay of Naples. And I travelled quite a lot. Obviously, I worked for a holiday company, so I was travelling to and from Naples quite a lot, and I did get a few chances and days off to actually travel around the city, and obviously Hand of God, I think, was more set in the late 80s because it's all the Hand of God, it's all set around with Maradona. Same for
yeah.
Napoli. I liked that. Visually, there was a lot of one beautiful scene, especially when they're down the Amalfi Coast and they're sitting up in the hills of the Amalfi and the family all sitting together. I think that was more was it a semi-biopic? Maybe it's
Yeah.
Sorrentino. I used to keep calling him Paolo Sorrento. Is this film get actual a UK release? Is it one that may
I
end
think
up
it
on
is
Netflix?
because I saw a trailer, like a UK trailer for it. So I think it's gonna be like sometime around February, but I might be wrong.
Yeah,
It's in the first part of the year.
first part of the year. Let's go on to the next one. My next choice surprised a few people because some people liked it. Never said it was spectacular or anything. It had a fantastic cast, and that film is Firebrand. That is, as I said, fantastic cast. It's got Alicia Vikander in it. It's Catherine Parr, Jude Law as Henry VIII, Sam Riley, Erin Doherty. I found it a severely disappointing outcome. I've mentioned before, I think in the best of films, which is available now to listen, I'm not the biggest fan of your period dramas and your thrillers. But there is certain sections of history I do like. So I was willing to give Karim Manu's film a chance. So this takes us obviously back to Tudor England. It's blood soaked, and Catherine Parr, she was the sixth and last wife of King Henry VIII, and he called a regent whilst he was off fighting overseas. So Catherine, she did everything she could to push a new future through. Obviously, if anyone knows the history, Henry at the time was Catholic and Catherine was Protestant. So she was getting a lot of radical beliefs through here as well. And when he came back and he was getting increasingly alien and more paranoid, he started turning his view on the radicals who sort of believed in what Catherine believed in, and one of them is charging Catherine's childhood friend for treason and then burnt her at the stake. And so obviously she was horrified, but she had to force to deny, she had to deny everything to keep herself alive as well. And obviously conspiracy kept spinning around through the palace, and they were all waiting for the Queen, or as she was when the King came back, to slip up and follow what the other five of Henry's wives have went with their head off. But if anyone knows the history, Catherine was the one who was the downfall of King Henry VIII. This is, as I said, a film that outlived King Henry, who was just a tyrannical nutcase, and who, as I said, he burned people or cut their heads off if he didn't like them or gave him what he wanted. And a lot of times it was his wives and he wanted, I think it was sons. And Catherine Parr deserves a better story told. And this is very half-baked, and it's better, and it's deserving of a better. It's considered a feminist retelling of the story, but it deserves a better feminist retelling of the story, because the story we get, there's no purpose to it. It's very heavy-handed, and actually Catherine actually comes out less interesting than the man who abused her. Made this film even worse. Like Hollywood does quite a lot. They throw in some fake event in the name of entertainment, and it felt like this was it felt like when you watched it, something was really missing, and the film was very unconvincing. Clotilde, have you actually seen this film?
Yes, I watched it actually last year in Cannes. Weirdly, it took such a long time to come out in the UK because I know it was the 2024 UK release. But I did like it. I didn't like it as much on a first watch. I think it improved a lot on a second watch,
Yeah.
interestingly enough. I feel like it sort of throws a lot at you. There's a lot of like historical facts and just sort of details of the politics of the time that I think if you weren't entirely familiar with would be like a lot when you first watch it. So watching it a second time and knowing the background more than I did before watching it ever was a lot better for me, because then I could notice some of the nuances and details that maybe I had missed because I was focusing on sort of getting the plot. So I did like it a lot more, but I think they're really good. Jude Law was so scary, and
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like we see him in very different roles usually to this. So for me, it was a nice change to see him play like such an evil and kind of revolting character.
Yeah.
I was very surprised. I also thought the kind of set design and costumes were very good. I think with the Tudors, it's really easy to sort of like do it wrong, or it's just like this. I think the perception is not as clear as to what they actually look like, costume wise. There's a lot of like TV shows and stuff like Rain or The Other Boy and Girl, which is a movie that I didn't get the costume part really wrong, and so I appreciate that at least one film was doing it right, in the sense that it is really beautiful to see that. So if you look at a painting of Henry VIII of Catherine Parr, the costumes actually do look the same, and I think that's quite impressive. But yeah, I think it's a hard movie to digest.
What is your next film?
My next film, which should I go with? Okay, it's an Italian film. It's again a Netflix release. I think it's because sometimes I'm just bored and I decide to watch stuff on Netflix, and it turns out not to be very great. This one is called The Tearsmith. It's horrible. I think it's generally probably the worst film I've seen the whole year. It's okay. It's based on like an Italian book that I had heard of already before watching the film. Not in a good way. I had heard like quite harsh criticism. It was very much in the vein of like I don't want to say fan fiction because it's not entirely based on fan fiction, but that kind of writing, like the sort of TikTok sensation that, I mean, nothing wrong with like BookTok, and some really good books get popular on it. But then I think a lot of it is sort of like talked about as like great literature, and then you read it and it's not very good. So I didn't read the book because I heard really bad things about it, and also, yeah, I just wasn't interested. But then the movie came out, and I thought, oh shit, just to see what's happening. And yeah, maybe I shouldn't have because it's not good. I think there's a lot of problems with it. Interestingly, it seems that non-Italian speakers liked it more than Italian speakers, and I think that's because when you watch it either dubbed or with subtitles, I'm not sure how it is on Netflix like UK, you maybe don't notice many of the problematic things. I think you notice if you speak the language. Like, I'm so sorry, the acting is so bad. I think this like bless them. I think it's the first film.
Yeah.
I hope it is. Um, but the line delivery is so flat. They've got barely any chemistry. I don't even know if they did auditions for this because it's not great. I heard from like when I was looking at reviews online that at the very least people have said that they do look exactly like the characters were described. So maybe that's what they focused on, but they can't really do the job, I'm afraid. And I also think it's just the story doesn't hold up as well. There's so many like plot holes, or not plot holes, just things that you're like, why is this a thing? Like, who cares? Um, but basically, it's about this girl who I don't remember the name of, but she's the main character, and she was an orphan, so she's been in this orphanage for like her entire life, and it's a very abusive environment. Um, which we barely see because she speaks about it, but you don't really see anything from the orphanage that much. But then when the story starts, she was 16, I think, and she gets adopted. But a surprise, as it turns out, the other person, it's not just her, this couple also adopts another guy, and he's like 18, and he was in the orphanage with her, and for some reason, he seems to like hate her, he can't like be around, and blah, blah, blah. And they hate each other. Of course, it turns into like a sort of forced proximity, enemies to lovers kind of thing, which is weird because they're like adopted in the same family. Super weird, super creepy. That alone as a sort of plot device, I hated it. Like it made me very comfortable, so I couldn't even go for like the main couple because they're like, this is just weird. And it shouldn't be like that, but that's also like from the source material. It's just it's not a good film, and I think something that I also noticed, and I think you wouldn't probably pick up on it, for like non-Italian speakers, is that it's super weird because it's set in Italy, but like everybody has like an English name, and it's like I don't know, that was like so weird for me. I kept thinking like, why is this happening? It was really sort of like breaking the fourth wall for me. I was like, why are they all named like not even John? John's a normal name, but like they had this weird English sounding names, but then they were in Italy, and I was like, what was this? And the school and stuff, like all the sort of elements feel very American, as if I don't know the author or whoever, like they saw like an American movie and decided to take some of those elements and put them in an Italian context. But it feels very odd, and it for me it distracted me a lot from the story as well because I was just like, what's happening? Where's this set? So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I've not seen it.
It's
However,
okay. You don't have to.
yeah, I this morning posted the writers of the People's Movies, including myself, worst films list on the website this morning, and I believe someone else picked The Tear Smith as one of the worst films. I don't know
I'm
who.
so glad. I'm so
I'm
glad it's not just I have to check it out.
Yeah, I'm certain there's someone else. I don't know if it's Federica, who's your fellow Italian, but
I'm glad that she might have watched it and hated it too. That's
yeah,
so
and she's probably not picking up the same. If it is picking up the same thing as you,
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean with the names. Like obviously, my full name is John Paul, so obviously, if they're saying John Paul, I would be expecting it to say Giovanni Paolo,
Yeah,
But
exactly.
that type of thing. But no, hey, it's John Paul. Hey, Giovanni, come sta
Yeah,
molto bene. You know, uh,
exactly.
exactly. I'm expecting something like that. As in the language, it was obviously we mentioned Sorrentino's film. I know occasionally Sorrentino's films can be very regional, as in Neapolitan. Is this film's language regional language, or is it just general Italian? It's
Uh,
maybe why you were maybe picking, was it picking up? Where was the actual film based in Italy?
I have no idea because I don't think they specified like where it's meant to be set.
Yeah,
I think it was filmed somewhere in the north because I remember looking it up, or maybe it comes, when at the end, like it comes like, oh, this was sponsored by this region or wherever.
yeah,
So I remember seeing something about it, but the film never like ever specifies where in Italy we are, which is also weird because I think, it's just quite different from
yeah.
north to south. And like you said, the regional accents usually play a big part in Italian films. So on this one, it's just that I think that's also why it's like so flat, really nothing to it. It could be set anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
It actually would be better, I think, if it was set somewhere else because it would make more sense. But yeah.
Shall I go into my next movie? My next movie won this year's Razzie's Worst Film of the Year. It won 5 of them in total, and that is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
Oh, I did not see that either. Thank God.
You're glad you never. I've seen both. I mean, it's amazing to think that this actually was given a press screening. I don't know. I can't comment on London because there's obviously there's a lot of press screenings for films of all different sizes in London. Don't get me wrong. Up here in the Glasgow area, we do in Edinburgh, we do get some other films, but usually it's the mainstream films. And 75% of the journalists walked out in this movie. That is very
Wow.
unusual. That is very, very unusual. I decided to stay because I watched the first one, which was just called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And that, I just wanted to see if it improved because this time they get a better budget. Basically, the first one made it name for itself with a big success thanks to its festival run, and then it got a limited cinema run as well, and its worldwide box office was just over £5 million. That obviously in Hollywood terms, that's not a lot. That'll probably pay a day's wage for one of these big Hollywood stars. But for a film whose budget was virtually near enough zero, that's a fantastic achievement. So this is directed by Rhys Frake Waterfield, and revenge is on the mind. And obviously, Winnie the Pooh, yeah, it is the characters. So there's Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Owl, and Trigger head into town looking for Christopher Robin. Yeah, in this film, Christopher Robin is a real character, and so are they. They are not happy for obviously, Christopher revealing their existence. And throughout the film, you get to see news stories and people reliving their nightmares of what actually happened. They end up going into the town of Ashdown and lay on the carnage. I get basically, I would say, verbally abused by one of the producers because I says I did not like the movie. The first movie I'm talking about at a festival I was at. You probably guess what festival it is. I don't go to many. I thought, you know what? Let's see if they've improved. I'm somebody that likes to give people a chance. Unless you're MCG, I don't give you a chance. So expectations for this one were very high. So as I said, it had a bigger budget. According to them, it had a better looking film, or that's what they wanted us to believe, because this was absolute rubbish and actually looks worse. The first film, people laughed with it. It's a bit much like, what you said with Megapolis. People laughed with it, but ended up the first one. The second one, they actually laughed at it, or even, in my case, cringed at it. Because if you're really looking for a really bad, gory film, this is probably one of the films that will eventually become It's So Bad, So Good. It'll do the trick for you. One of the critics called this meta cinema, a meta cinema feast. This is nothing like a meta cinema film because it lacks in a lot of things and it lacks in any type of message. And what I will say is Tommy Wiseau, compared to the acting in this film, is more Oscar worthy than the guys who acted in this. And I don't like to be horrible on it because it's a small indie movie. This is where you're going to show where they had a bit of a budget. The older British actor Simon Callow, Clotilde.
Sorry, say that again?
Simon Callow.
Yeah.
See, yep. He's in this, and I'm wondering if
No.
he's in this. He's got
Yeah,
one of
it's
he's got one of the creepiest, strangest, weird Scottish accent. It's a bit like, Gerard Butler. When you hear Gerard Butler, his accent starts with a Scottish accent, goes into an American accent, and occasionally goes into an English accent, and then diverts. Would you believe that me and Gerard Butler are actually from the same hometown, Paisley?
Really?
Yeah, we're
I
from the
didn't know
same hometown. Yeah. I can understand the Americanisms, because his career and like
Hmm.
anything when you're younger, certain age groups, you go to a country. I lived in Manchester for on off for 7 years, and occasionally people were saying you're picking up a bit of a Mancunian accent at times. I didn't hear it, but people kept telling me a little bit like that. This was just a really, really creepy accent, and this film is absolutely awful. They are making more movies, as in why they picked that. It's sort of the Winnie the Pooh. It's sort of doing a lot of these films are all get I forget what they call it. It's like a copyright, but the copyright sort of runs out after 100 years, and for some strange reason, Disney didn't pick up the books rights again, and these people picked him up. So I think they've got films like Bambi coming out, Snow White. I think
Well,
even it's you can name it. It's absolutely awful. So avoid this like the plague. So Clotilda, anything else you want to say about this?
I did not watch that one, and I don't plan to. Even the
Yeah,
first one, I just from the premise, it just didn't sound like for me, first of all. And
yeah,
then, I didn't really get at all, so I wasn't interested. I think it's interesting though how they, still have plans to make them despite the fact that they were not very successful. So maybe, I don't know, maybe they're hoping that Bambi has a better reception. I,
yeah.
I I don't think it will, but we'll see.
It's Altitude Films, I believe, are the ones who released this film and ignore it. Clotilda, what is your next film?
My next one is Lemon of the Ballad, which I saw at Cannes and I wish I didn't. It's a very, very long. It's like, I think it's nearing 3 hours actually. Maybe it's not because I remember thinking it was 3 hours and then someone told me that it wasn't. Um, but it felt like that to me. It felt really long. And it's one of those things that could have ended like I think at least half an hour before. It you kept thinking this is the final scene, but it was just a mess. Ben Whishaw plays Liminal, and he's actually quite good. I think he's a good actor, and he does a really good job. And I think the acting is not that bad in his defense, but the rest is not great. It's about inspired by the real life Limonov, who was many things. A writer, a revolutionary. At one point, he becomes a boxer.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and a poet. And he was from Russia and travels to the US. And as an idea, it's quite interesting because it seems like he has led quite an interesting life. But the film was really weak for me because it starts, I believe, when he goes to the US the first time, or maybe he's still in Russia and he's about to go to the US for the first time. But I feel like you don't know anything about him before that, so there's no like background. It's not even like really mentioned. I think he sees his parents at one point, but you don't really know anything about like his childhood, which is fine. But I think created a character that didn't have much depth because you do see him like sort of living all these different lives, but it doesn't feel like a sort of one character and you see him grow or whatever, become better or worse. Doesn't matter which way it goes, but they just felt like many separate stories, but I couldn't see a sort of unity to it. And I don't know if that was the point, but I think it made the film badly paced and it made me not care very much. He's also like not a good person, which is fine. Like your main character doesn't have to be like a hero or a good person, but then I think you need to put like a better effort into like why I would wanna follow his story and why I would want to like root for him. I think that part was very much missing. I was just like, I hate this guy, and we like move on. But we didn't. We still watched the whole thing. Um, I also think like his life spent such a long time that historically that it would have been interesting to see more of a switch between the different years and the different like eras that he lived through. And I feel like I didn't see that at all. Like it didn't tell me what year it was with the intertitles, no, with the subtitles. Okay. Then perhaps I wouldn't even have noticed. I think, especially with biopics, you really should be able to portray the time period as well, not just what is happening in someone's life.
Hmm.
So, yes. Also, I just have a thing. I probably said this before, but I don't like when like actors that are English speaking. put on a fake accent, and to Ben, which just read it, it doesn't sound that bad. I do not speak Russian, so I don't even think I could judge that very much. It's just, I just don't understand why you would do that. Like, you either hire like a Russian actor in this case, or just do it in English. Like, I don't understand why we're doing the English with a sort of fake accent. It seems like a really odd choice in general.
I've never seen it. It sounds that I'm not going to see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on the accent thing, because especially Russian,
Hmm.
that comes across as quite comical in
Yeah.
Hollywood. In the same way, and as you've mentioned before in previous podcasts, the Italian language, the people
Hmm.
who do it make it comical, and to me
Yeah.
that's very offensive. And the same Asian languages as well. Yeah, I know politically in the world's very fragile at the moment. However, there is countries that used to be formerly part of Russia where actors who are freely working in this part of the world could easily have done it. There you go. For example, Anora, there's quite a few actors in there, they were genuine accents, and I know they were for, I think it was at Belarus or Georgia or something like that, but to an untrained ear, you could easily have said they're from Moscow, some other part of Russia, something they could do done there. So, well, I go into my next movie. What I will say, folks, Megalopolis and Uglies are also on my list. Clotilde, how many movies do you have left? I
Oh,
think
let
I've
me
got,
check. I think one, and then I have a few sort of like honorable mentions.
yeah, I think I've got three actually.
One.
Right, so my next one is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And all I say is if something strange happens in your neighbourhood, I wouldn't be calling these Ghostbusters. The first film, Afterlife, which came out, was one of the sort of first big films that came out after life after COVID, when we started opening the cinemas up again. Afterlife, it was like a reboot of the Ghostbusters films, where it showed the Spengler family. Dr. Spengler, obviously the real life actor who played Spengler, who sadly died a few years ago. And so this was one way of getting him into the film. That film, I think, was a fairly decent hit. And since it's been out, it's been on TV quite a lot, and I believe it was on last week on BBC or one of the other channels. So this time, Frozen Empire, the Spengler family returned back to where it all started, back to New York and to the iconic firehouse, and they team up with the original Ghostbusters. And in there, they developed a top secret research lab, take sort of busting ghosts to the next level. And obviously, there when they discover an ancient artifact, this what it does is it unleashes an evil force. The Ghostbusters of old and new end up having to join forces to protect their home and obviously save the world from a second age. So people like Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, they're all back. So are the original Ghostbusters, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Bill Murray, the ones that are still with us. There's a few others in there: Kumail Nanjiani, Patton Oswalt, Celeste O'Connor, and Logan Kim, to name a few others. This, and obviously Annie Potts, who played the secretary in the original films. Nostalgia, I think, is good in films when it's used every so often, but not every 2 minutes like Frozen Empire. Clotilde, have you actually seen this film?
No, I didn't particularly care, so and also
Exactly.
I'm not gonna watch it now.
Yeah. I'm of an age where I was a kid when the first one came out. I think I was about 9. Then I was about 14, 13, 14, maybe a little bit older when the second one came out. So I've got a bought like a connection with it. I loved them. What this film does is it's got nostalgia every 2 minutes in it. And what it does, because of that, it lacked focus, and that's never the nook and cranny of the film. And it really wanted to be one of the original films, no, with all the original cast in it, like, hey, look, there's Bill Murray. Not a single one of the new characters, and even the established newer characters from Afterlife, get a chance to establish themselves. With one of the characters, Finn Wolfhard, who's forgotten about after a certain part of the film. And I think that's a big crime. I'm not saying he's a major superstar, but he's appeared in one of the biggest hits of Netflix and streaming services is Stranger Things. Regardless if you hate it or like it, that series has made him a big name, and he's a big name amongst the sort of younger cast. So that made it a really weird reason why they just forgot about him. This is overstuffed and it lacks cohesion as well. And as I said, it gives the film no chance to breathe or try and set the tone because it's jumping about from scene to scene really quickly. And all I'll say is they should have listened to Walter Peck and ended the Ghostbuster franchise in the other films. Oh look, there's Bill Murray. Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire isn't a great film. So Clotilde, would you like to tell us about that film that you've got left in the list?
Yes, I think this one might be the worst along with the Tourist if I have to rank them. And it's Endurance. It's a documentary. It was at the London Film Festival and I hated it. The more I think about it and the more I hate it. That's why it wasn't as low in my ranking at first. But I kept thinking about it and I kept finding more reasons not to like it. So that's not good. It's about the Endurance ship that sank some time ago. And I think the biggest, this probably second biggest actually issue is that it's trying to follow three plot lines. One is the actual ship and how it sank and all of that. And the other one, which I think is more interesting, is these people in the present day trying to recover what is left of it. But it keeps jumping back and forth. It's so much that it feels like two different documentaries. And every time the one storyline gets interesting, then it jumps to the other. And I think they're very badly cut together because by the time then you're jumping back to the first one, you forget what was happening. It feels like they have no reason to keep jumping back and forth. It's not like they're mirroring each other or anything. So I thought that was a very odd choice. The other odd choice, which is perhaps worse, is that especially in the bit about the endurance, because it was in the past and I don't think we have that much about it. They had a brilliant idea of using AI,
Jeez.
and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work in general, but I think especially in documentary, it's extremely problematic. So they're doing reenactments, which I think is problematic already in a documentary, and personally, I don't really like it in general. There are some exceptions, of course. But the reenactments are not with actual actors who play like whoever was in the endurance then. They're with AI. And then they also use like AI to read whatever these people left in their diaries. And first of all, it feels eerie. Like even before I knew it was AI, because they do tell you at the end credits, which I think they could tell at the beginning, but that's a whole different point. The reenactment scenes just feel really creepy without like wanted to be because you can't even make out the faces of these people because obviously they're not actors and the voices sound quite robotic. So I think you can clearly tell something's wrong, like something is not right. Um, well, it's terrible, and I don't understand the choice behind it because even if you did want to do reenactments and use like voiceover of the through letters or diaries or whatever they are, then why not hire actors to do it? Like that's the thing. Reenactments are a thing in documentaries, whether you like it or not. But if you make that choice, then I just don't really see why AI had to be used. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It makes the film worse, and I think as a documentary practice, it creates a precedent that's quite boring. I don't think AI should be used in films, but I don't think, especially in documentaries, it seems quite problematic to me because if your whole point is documenting reality, then it just feels a bit counterintuitive. So I think that's my biggest issue with the film, along with the plot narrative issues. But this one is just something that I think from a maybe even moral and ideological point of view, I just can't look past, especially because it's a documentary. I don't think it should even be considered one because of the things that it's doing with the AI stuff.
I haven't seen it.
Please don't.
No. It's going back to when we were talking about documentaries and the best of films.
Hmm.
This sounds like one, if you are going to watch it, because it's National Geographic in it. Watch it on the National Geographic channel rather than the big screen.
Yeah.
But the use of AI, it's getting terrifying now how much
Yeah.
they're using it.
Worrisome.
In life in general. Luckily at the moment we're not at the Terminator level of AI where it's virtually about to take over and destroy us. But the way we're going, we'll go that way as well. And society is making us feel that we need it. Don't get me wrong, there might be times, yeah, AI should be embraced, but 99.9% of the time, it's humanity should be embraced in it. I've got two films left. What I'll do is this the one I'm going to say now. I know you have something to say in it because I know you liked it. The last one I'll just go quickly through, and then we'll do the as we call them dishonourable mentions.
Yes.
The film I know you liked because we have mentioned it before in a previous episode is the Book of Clarence.
Oh yeah, I did like it.
Yeah, I saw your review on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know some people going, but that was a 2023 film. Yeah, you would be correct. However, I think it was Sony. Was it Sony here that released that? Not
I
100%
think
sure.
so.
They released it in the UK early January, I believe, or early this year anyway. It was directed by the British filmmaker called James Samuel. People might know him as he's the brother of the 80s singer Seal, but his previous film was Harder They Fall, which is on Netflix. As you'll agree with me, Clotilde, it's got a great cast. Lakeith Stanfield, he's the main
Yeah.
guy in it. He's Clarence. There's Omar Sy, Benedict Cumberbatch, David Oyelowo, Alfie Woodford. Your favourite, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, she's in it, and James McAvoy. So the Book of Clarence follows a streetwise, a down on a luck man, Clarence, played by Stanfield, and he's struggling and he's trying to find a better life for his family. I think Jean-Baptiste, she plays his mum, if I remember rightly, and he's starting to free himself. He wants to free himself of debt, so he's captivated by the power of the rising Messiah and his apostles. So he risks everything to carve his own path, his own divine life, his own religion, if I like to say, and he ultimately discovers that redemptive power, or believe maybe his only way out. Clotilde, I'm going to let you say your thing first, or do you want me to say my thing first, and then you? What I'll do is I'll say
Yeah,
mine,
go for it.
and then I'll let
Yeah, I'll
you.
jump in.
Yeah, rather than being other way around, let's end this one a positive. It's another film I think it asks, what was the whole point of it? The acting in it isn't terrible, but I felt I was left very disconnected with the film. It wants to be the Life of Brian, comedy-esque, and probably the closest they got that Life of Brian-esque type comedy is probably Benedict Cumberbatch's character. It was very Monty Python-esque. The humour is nowhere close where it wanted to be, and it actually felt at times very bland. And it's obviously set back in the times of the Bible, the early days of humanity. They were hitting us with very contemporary jokes. I know it's meant to be a satire in that of that time, and I felt the pace of the film. I understand it's all about they were all smoking the weed and that, and they're going for that sort of chilled out pace. But I think it diluted the story and prevented any character development. But I think this could be one of these films, a few years down the line, it could be considered a cult film. So I just felt really disconnected and wasn't a great film. So Clotilde, it's over to you if you want to defend the Book of Clarence.
I did like it. I had so much fun with it. I think Ian, and obviously nothing can compare. I do think there's a bit of like a tone switch in the third act which doesn't quite work to me. I think the first two acts were really good, but the last one didn't work for me. I think there was just like tone switch that was a bit I didn't really get it. And I felt like it was sort of going down rather than going up as it should on a third act. But I thought the acting and the performances really sold it to me. Their chemistry was also quite good, in terms of like bouncing off each other for the funny moments and like comedic timing. I really like that. But yes, it does have its faults. I think with like the Life of Brian is it's kind of obvious that it was coming, but I also think it's unfair to the film because I feel like it's one of those like classics that you can't ever like remake or like come close to. So I thought it was fun. I was laughing, so that's why it worked for me.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm going to do, folks, I'm going to just read out my last film, and then we'll go into the dishonourable mentions. Clotilda, have you seen Salem's Lot?
I have not.
Just as well you haven't. If you want to see
I
Salem's
didn't.
Lot, I would watch the David Soul 1979 version, which a TV miniseries. It was shown here in the UK, I believe, on BBC. I really wanted to enjoy the new version of it. Don't get me wrong, it had its moments, but it descended into a paint by numbers hell. As I say, people called this a remake. Technically, it's not a remake because the previous incarnations were both mini TV series. As I mentioned there, the David Soul version, the 1979 version, which also starred the legendary James Mason as Straker. There was also a 2004 version. I'm 100% unsure which streaming channel or TV channel it was shown in the UK, but it had Lob Rowe as Ben Mears, but it starred Donald Sullivan as Straker. Salem's Lot, the 2004, 2024 version, stars Lewis Pullman as Ben Mears, and he's a big-time writer who decides to return home to his hometown of Jerusalem Lot, or Salem's Lot, as where the film gets its name from, because he wants some inspiration for his next book. He's going through a bit of a blockage at the moment. And when he arrives there, everything looks good, and then obviously he starts to find bad memories, and also starts to learn that there's a vampire preying on the residents. This was a little bit like a girl. It was on borderline for me. I was unsure, should I do worst or disappointing, because the actual vampire story is very much of the old-fashioned type. It's more like, how would I say, Count Orlok and Nosferatu than say Dracula or the vampires in True Blood or even Twilight, that type of thing. The pacing was too slow, and we started to meet a lot of pointless characters. And so when some impactful does happen, well, at this point we're already looking at what or some do, which you shouldn't do, looking at your mobile phone to see how long the film has before we need to scatter. I do appreciate in the book, which was written in 1975, it was a slow burner, so that hence the tone of it. But I was a little perplexed that what the film is actually trying to aim at here, because as we get near the end, it becomes some more generic, cheap and nasty looking CGI's vampires that play horror nowadays, and some of the shows and films that we've mentioned there in this. And there's an iconic scene in this. It's probably the most terrifying scene. When I'm talking about the original, I haven't seen the 2004 version, but the 1979 version has some truly terrifying scenes for a TV movie. And one of them is there's a couple of boys you meet in the film, and one of them gets bitten by the vampire, and he's floating. I can't remember if it was in his brother's house or the hospital, and he's floating, and the next minute you see him, or the fog is there, and he's scratching on the window. A lot of fans of the previous incarnation were going, yes, yes. And then the trailer came out, and it was in the trailer, and I think that spoiled everything for the film. And then when you get to see it, it looked very, very artificial, because the CGI doesn't look great. Warner Bros. Released it here in the cinemas in the UK, but in America, I think it went right onto Max. And I think if they did it here, it might have been better to do it. But obviously, here it would have been maybe a Sky. Gary Doberman, he directed this. The film had a lot of promise, but he actually fails to capture that potential of the film, and it was very dull. And it had no imagination in it. Anything else you want to add to Salem's Lot?
Not sad that I won't be watching it.
Yeah. As we mentioned there, shall we do a few dishonourable mentions? Clotilda, would you like to go ahead?
Yes. Oh, I'm ready. So, one is Dragon Keeper. Oh yeah, Netflix. This seems to be a thing with me. I do have to say, I think if you watch the original, it might be better. I watched the dub version and I really didn't like the dubbing. I didn't have a choice. Netflix very kindly sent it to me. Thank you so much. But so it was dubbed. Yeah, if I could have chosen, I would have seen the original with subtitles. Um, very interesting premise. It's like takes inspiration from Chinese mythology. I just felt like the story was very boring and didn't really deliver on that. And
Yeah.
I keep going with the Netflix ones because I have a few. Hot
Go for it.
Fuzzy is a Christmas one. It's not great. I mean, I think with Hallmark films, you don't expect them to be good, but I think you expect to at least have a bit of. And I think with Hot Frost, I watch a lot of like Christmas Hallmark films, and I think Hot Frosty was like, it wasn't even like bad to the point that you laughed at it. It was just like very boring for me. Um, but you're just making gingerbread cookies and wrapping gifts, fine. I put it in the background. It's fun enough. The premise is basically a snowman house. Another Netflix one is Irish Wish. It also kind of feels like a Hallmark thing for St. Patrick's Day. Very odd. The acting is not great, and I already forgot the whole plot. So there's that.
That's probably the best
Um,
thing.
yeah, that is probably true. I also didn't particularly like All of You. I feel like everybody else liked it, and I was just being a hater. I was just so done with it. I think after the first act, I was just like, enough. It's meant to be like a love story, but I found the main character so unlikable that every time she was on screen, I just wanted to leave. So that was me. The acting is quite good though, I have to say,
Yeah.
but I found her so unlikable, and also like love triangles are getting a bit boring nowadays, so that didn't help. Um, Another appropriately titled one is Land of Bad, which is bad. Is meant to be like an action film with like Russell Crowe and this one special mission. It's boring. I don't even know what the mission is anymore, but you don't even care about their lives basically. That's the worst thing. Like it's an action film. I should at least be interested in whether they survive or not, but I wasn't. And my last one is gonna be one that you mentioned, the best movies, but Civil War. I think we know from our episode on it that I'm not a big fan. So that was more disappointing, to be honest, than anything else.
Yeah.
I just expected more.
I've actually got these honourable mentions and disappointing films. Strangers Chapter 1. The original film, which was out about 2008, was actually very good. It was very good. It was Liv Tyler. She was in that. Forget the man's name. It was very good, but the film that they made about 7 or 8 years after that, absolutely terrible. This is Rennie Harlin. Rennie Harlin, who did Die Hard 2, directed this. And don't get me wrong, he's not the greatest of directors, but when it comes to action films, he can come and go. It's not really great. Next one is Venom: The Last Dance. I'm not going to talk much about that. It is Chronicle Take Two, which I did with Federica, which you can find on the website. The next one might surprise some people. I think just because I wasn't the targeted audience, and they were called people say, "No, you like it? It's a body horror." Night Bitch, the Amy Adams
Oh
film.
yeah, I did.
I,
I didn't love it, but I did like it.
yeah, I mean, the bit where it would be close to body horror, David Cronenberg-esque, was a bit where a certain pus or something came out. That was a bit it, nothing else. And then there was a film I also did on a previous take two. It was Sting, the one about the big spider. It was an Australian movie. It was a shame because the directors did a couple of. I really should remember these films. Is they did a couple of Wormwood. They directed Wormwood, which was a zombie, but it was a sort of zombie comedy. The first one was really good. It was just a bloody and gore. If you want one of these sort of gore movies where silly things happen, a bit like The Substance, the end where it just goes all crazy, bonkers like that type of thing. I was expecting it to be like a 15, 18. It felt like a poor man's Tim Burton movie. You know, it was nothing spectacular about it. My next film is another Australian film. I think they did a film, some like, Thousand Acres or something like that. I watched it at the Glasgow Fright Fest nearly a year ago. It was called You Never Find Me. And when you see it, it looks like a caravan park out in the middle of the outback. The weather is absolutely horrible. And this man, older man, middle-aged man, on his own, and he's just about to sit down, have something to eat. So something like 2, 3 in the morning, and then he gets a chat in the door, and it's some girl who's saying, "Oh, He's all wet. He invites her in, but there's a lot of things start to happen in it. It's about 80 minutes long, but 75 minutes is they two chatting. But as you get closer to the end of it, it's a bit more psychological when you start to see it. It was just awful. It was just dull and boring, you know. And my last film is a Kevin Hart film. It's a Netflix film, and I know in the worst films list that I posted today, I wasn't the only one who had it on that, and that is Lift. It was a heist movie. It was awful. It was boring. It was nothing spectacular. It was just terrible, you know. So I've got a few disappointing films. I'll just mention. I won't go into them detail. It's a recent Robbie Williams film, The Better Man. I just thought it wasn't anything great. Gladiator 2. It was awful, but not awful in the sense of enough to go on my worst films list. The Fall Guy. Once again, I'm of an age where I remember when Lee Majors played the Fall Guy on the TV series, and this was nothing like it. That was just Ryan Gosling throwing himself about, trying to be funny, and it wasn't funny, but it wasn't terrible. And then it was the Amy Winehouse film biopic from Aaron Taylor Johnson's wife. Forget her name. She did 50 Shades of Grey, and that's Back to Black. I did mention one film I'm glad I missed, and that's Madam Web. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this, Clotilda?
I think that's it. I think if we mentioned all the ones that I didn't like, the rest, I have a lot that are just okay.
Yeah, I'm the
They're
same.
not great.
It's so good to finally get there to the end. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you don't realise how much trouble we've had to get this done. That's why I'm saying the following day, because we were doing it we started the same time. So when you do hear it, you might hear different volumes of microphones and things like that. We were having problems with microphones. I do apologise. There's not much we can do. I've not edited it yet, but I'll do my best to get it as best as I can. So yeah, have it, folks. That is the Chronicle's worst films of 2024. And that's your wrap, folks. That is your episode 39. Thank you very much for all the studios letting us review their films. I know sometimes it's not the best film reviews that you were looking for. All I'll say, folks, is all the films are either in cinema, they'll either been streaming, they'll either been Blu-ray or DVD or on some sort of digital format. Clotilda, thank you very much for joining us. We finally got there. Would you like to let the viewers know where they can find you on social media? And any other work?
I'm still scrolling on Twitter, which I don't really use anymore, but hey, I'm on there. The person being Chloe on Instagram. Yes, don't scroll on Letterboxd as well.
That's as on the Chronicle and the People's Movies. You find us in several places. Blue Sky at the People's Movies, the People's Movie at Facebook and X, Instagram at the People's Movies. We're also at YouTube, where you'll find these episodes also on there. That's at the People's Movies 1. We're actually on Pinterest. It's just really me, and it's at TPM_UK. You will find episodes of the Chronicle on all your favourite popular podcast sites, especially Podbean. I'll put a link below on this podcast where you can find it. That is the main place to find the podcast, or obviously over the People's Movies. Over at Podbean, you will find other links to other places you find it. Places like Castbox, Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon, you name it, Podchaser, you'll find them actually over there. Occasionally, the Chronicle will continue its chat over at the Chronicle Take 2. As ever, stay tuned over at social media and the People's Movies. Over at the People's Movies, you can also find me. You can sign up for an email newsletter. You find future episodes and everything that we are posting over at the website. Please do, in places like the social media, please do share and like on there. We are a small website. We are a small podcast. We want to get this podcast out to more and more people. Sharing it and liking it, that does help us as well. You can actually go over to the People's Movies, where you can find a link to buy me a coffee, where you can actually help us out there. Obviously, on behalf of myself and all the writers, I do thank you for joining us. I do hope your Christmas, if you did celebrate it, was great. And also, I do hope you have an absolute fantastic 2025. We have got some plan several plans in place to expand on and the Chronicle, the Chronicle Take 2, and the Chronicle Extra. So stay tuned for that. Clotilda, thank you very much. I do wish you a happy new year as well. Hope 2025 brings you all the success.
You
And
too.
I do thank you for joining us. Until the next time, enjoy the movies.